So it is John 15:9 through 17, which is actually a continuation of the vine. And so it goes, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. If I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I choose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another." Now this is the good word for the good people this particular week.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you for my worship team here backing me up so I can get back on point. And so, this is a very special Sunday because it's also Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers out here. But also, it is a Sunday that is appointed in love. And I think that's really important because there's so much that we get from the Bible, but one of the abounding themes from Genesis all the way to the end is love. And Jesus is asking us and reminding us today that if we are a follower of him, if we are indeed children of God, children of the light, children of Jesus, then we ought to be choosing love. And so in today's reading, we hear a lot about what it means to choose love, to be a good neighbor to one another. And also in our second reading this morning, we heard, "Whoever is without love does not know God, for God is love." So in this gospel, Jesus says, "This is my commandment, to love one another as I have loved you." So if you were unable to do that just on the outset, you have already missed the biggest blessing in your life when you came into this world. You came in through love. No matter what the circumstances, you came in through love because love is what got you here. And it is a blessing that you are here with us. And so I want to frame our conversation this way. I hope that this is a wonderful way for you to receive this, is that we are affirmed by God's love for us in his Son, no matter what. There are no requirements over here that if this, then that. It is just period. Through God's love for us and through his Son, we are all affirmed. It would seem that it is even more fitting, of course, particularly now, to fall on Mother's Day, during a time that is still turbulent for us, is still uncertain for us, that still is not what we want to call our new normal. But it is a time that as we live into what's next, that we get to abide in the love of Jesus. And I'm going to use mothers as our living example of what Jesus is trying to help frame for us and help us understand what it means to have his unconditional love for us all. But before we get into this detail, I want to just flush it out a little bit. Because oftentimes when I say, or when we hear someone say, I'm in love, what are we talking about when we say, what is love? And I tried to gather my thoughts about this, and I didn't want to give you dictionary examples, but I was just trying to think of when you hear the word, when someone says, "Oh, I'm so in love." That's not romantic love, right? We all hopefully have experienced romantic love, but then there's also, the love oh my goodness, on Mother's Day today, I hope that I get flowers because I just love flowers. They're so beautiful. And of course, some chocolate, because that's God's food for us here on earth, chocolate. And so when we think about the word and how we often use love, certain things come to mind. But I don't think exactly that's particularly the kind of love that Jesus was talking about when he said choose love. Some of the examples that I think get at this a little bit more, I'm going to share with you from yesterday when we had a community gathering of our garden group. And so yesterday was the day that we came out in our jeans, or some folks were brave enough to have on some shorts, with our sweatshirts and everything else on, to do the mulching and to do putting in the new soil with the compost that was so rich. And it was a lot of work, but everybody was enjoying themselves. Everybody was like into it. Some of the kids who were like, this is too much work, decided to make wonderful signs and paint and hang out, but everybody was into it and everybody was excited to be in relationship with one another. And I think about when we showed up, Deb started welcoming everybody. She's like the little mother hen running around constantly in different places, trying to make sure everybody is okay, everybody is, got their little job and they're doing something. And then you have the sweet, very calming presence of Michelle, who, not me, the other Michelle, Mickey, who is always guiding our children and asking, can I help you with this? Or would you like to help me with this? Always inviting people in. And then there was Peggy and there was Granny Fran, who was in her walker, trying to mobilize around with, as we put more and more mulch around with her walker. Got a little bit more difficult, so she went out to the street. But we told her don't go too far because folks come around that corner a little too fast. But she was watching the children, giving directions, and just delighting in being able to be out and be in community. And then there was also Mo from one of our partners, Unity in Brookfield, who showed up with little Alice, who we remember was the size of now baby Sal, but now is like 3, and talking and running around. And at one point, Mo and Alice disappeared. They, I guess, went inside because Alice was hungry and it wasn't time yet, but you know how 3 years old are. They're not on our schedules. They're on their own schedule. So Mo went inside to get some snacks and a juice box and some things. And we looked down and there was little baby Sal in the little car seat, little rocker one, just hanging out, just quiet and peaceful, catching a snooze. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? That's how mothers are, that when they know that they are in a community of love, they can go and take off with one child knowing that the community has got the other children or the other child. And in fact, what the person we call our baby whisperer, Les, in our community, came over and checked out the baby just to make sure that little baby Sal was okay. And it was so interesting because the baby was definitely asleep. But when Les bent over to look at the baby and check out baby Sal and make sure and said a couple words, the baby actually smiled in their sleep. And then he went back with Ed Vicker, Heather's husband, and they were building the rest of the boxes, the garden boxes and so forth. But I bring that up to say that when we choose to be in relationship with people and choose to love one another, the blessings are just incredible. There was also another young little girl, the daughter of John, who's also from Unity, from the Christ the King campus, I believe. And he had come last year to help us out with the garden and came again this year. And his daughter Allie came again, and she was sort of the person who was in charge of the little artist pieces of doing the signs and everything. And at one point the kids were done and everybody was sort of dirty and messy, and her the most, because she was helping out everybody. And so I was like, you don't want to carry those paintbrushes home all, icky and yucky. And so she said, yeah. I said, well, you want to go inside with me to wash those up and wash your hands and everything? And she's like, yeah, okay. Now, this young lady has only, and I would say she's probably about like 9 or 10 or so. No, she will get mad at me, probably 10 or 11. And she decided to walk with me into the building. And I say that because, yes, she knows that I'm the pastor, but I wasn't wearing my collar. She's only met me maybe 2 or 3 times in her entire life. And, she stuck pretty close to her dad, but she came along with me, and then we just started chatting about different things. And I just thought about the fact that, if you really love people, they don't have to know you inside and out. it exudes from you that mothering piece, that, hurting your little chickadees, everyone's child is your child, right? We love everyone's children, and the children, remember, they are the truth tellers. They're the ones who have that inner, radar that they know immediately if someone is good or there's something up with those people, right? They know. And so it's just wonderful to get that affirmation and to think about that. And then this morning, I got my other reminder. And of course, at this particular time, he was still sleeping, which is my youngest son, Quetzal. And he looked like a little angel, because he's not always, but he looked like a little angel sleeping. And I was reminded of this now skinny little boy who is growing, that's, close to almost 4 feet. And he came out 8 years ago at 9 pounds. It was 9.5 pounds. Wait, no, he wasn't. He was 9.5. And I forget how long he was, but he was long. Big butterball. And he was the one who also I had my C-section with, the only C-section. Everybody else was natural childbirth, no drugs. I had sacrificed liquor and all my good stuff that I love I'm just going to be keeping it real, y'all, that I could have my wine and all that other stuff for all the 9 months, right? Almost 10. And then I had to have a C-section. The last one did me in. So I was like, okay, you're going to put me through it even before you get here. But, I love him too. But I think about all the things, this one came into the world giving me problems. My oldest one came into the world the perfect baby, so that then you do it again and say, okay, I'll have some more. Sort of duped you into doing that, which now is the one also on the other end that is putting me through it. But I say all of that if it weren't for the wonderful love that I chose to have at the beginning, I'm not quite so sure I could endure now. And I would say that's probably the case for so many of our mothers out there with their children that they choose to mother, and those that have come through their loins that they still mother. But all of those are gifts of us choosing to be in relationship with one another and getting mutuality and reciprocal love from those that we invest in. But I wanted to share with you as we go on, just to show you, just in case you didn't get it, I'm going to make it plain, just like Jesus did to the disciples and to us today, how when we think about mothers, and particularly on Mother's Day, and commemorate the lives of women that are mothers, what it means to have unconditional love, what it means to have that sacrificial love that Jesus has and continues to have for us. This came from one of my womanist theologians and a book, and it really captures, I think, the fullness of what it means to have sacrificial love. Mother's Day is the day that we commemorate the lives of the women who are anointed with the special and the mysterious something called mothering, which is best described as the nurturing, the caring, and the loving spirit of women who have chosen to mold and maintain our families and our communities. Mothering, though, be very clear, is not a biological thing, but it is a divine gift, meaning a gift from God. Many women have given birth to children, but they have not and may never have been mothers in the full sense of the word when we hear mother. Whereas there have been women who have never borne a child or children, but have been called and are mothers to countless individuals. There is an old saying that is, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. That is one that is true indeed, because it is often the hand of the mother that it takes the characterless, the shapeless, the little lumpiness of that flesh that is called human, and then, like the potter's clay, molds it, shapes it, makes it understand its worth as a person, as a citizen, as someone who is valuable in this society and to their family and to themselves. And that is a part of a long legacy of those who have been brought into this world through love. But mothering too has no color. It has no age. It has no ethnicity. It has no national origin, no geographic preference. Instead, mothering is a gift that is rarely convenient for the bearer of that gift. For the shoulders of a mother carries the burden of the nature and the nurture of the world. But for the recipient who gets all of this wonderful love that is absolutely necessary, it is like the very air that we breathe or the water, Mr. Munger, that we need to drink to sustain our lives. It is much like the gift of the sun. It is the mother that warms and sustains us, that then gives us life and life abundantly. Every soul that does not receive the life-giving rays of a mother often remains lifeless and sometimes ends up cold and hardened, just like the earth would without the warming of the sun. You see, the fertile ground, which is our foundation, the deep soil on which we stand, it is that same kind of fertile ground that a mother gives to a child, to a human being that decides how they will end up showing up in the world. Are they cold and heartless and have no care for themselves, and then therefore have no care for anyone else because they live a life based on scarcity rather than that foundation of love that fertilizes, that then lets them see the abundance of life and life in relationship with other people? You see, God was up to something with mothers. I think God realized that if God was going to give us humans free will, that God then couldn't be everywhere in the sense of everything that we do. Present, yes, but not controlling. And so God created mothers. Those of us who have been loved by the divine gift of a mother know this, because we have mothers that we know that the hand of God has been upon their lives, and thus then upon ours. They have been a true gift. Even in their shortcomings, they have still been a gift to us, because we are here today, and I know so many people that truly give to other people, so that even if you want to say, my mama this, my mama that, she did something right, and the others that mothered you along the way also poured in and did something right. And again, that is not by chance, that is not by coincidence, that is by the opportunities and the blessings of God that God worked through human people that touched your lives. You see, in that way, God is omnipresent through the hands of mothers. For the love of a God-fearing woman is indeed the extension of God's love. So on this day, we indeed honor those mothers who so feared and loved God that they stood up to the death-dealing forces of this world to secure places for life to grow, for it to be fertilized, for that the many of us are able to overcome the negative life circumstances that are always being presented, so that we could make then positive life choices. A mother's ambition outruns and exceeds the ambition that one has for oneself. You remember those times where like you didn't believe in yourself, but your mother would say those words? They would lay hands upon you and let you know that there was nothing that you couldn't do. And that if it didn't work out, it wasn't about getting to the destination, it was what you learned in the journey. And that particular thing then was not meant for you at this particular time in your life. And that God had other plans and you needed to be open to the Spirit, as someone always tells me. So, and listening, not just be open, but then listen when the Spirit shows up. And our mothers are ones who have always told us about being still and learning to listen, not just to them, but also to the words of the Spirit that is guiding us. And, you know, God said, I know these folks. I know they don't like to listen, They're going to give up all these kinds of excuses, even as Pastor Michelle is preaching and other preachers are preaching this morning. But we have infinite examples of women in the Bible. I think about the Old Testament, how we celebrate so many mothers in that particular book that birth dreams and hopes that continue to carry us today. I think about how we celebrate those modern-day midwives among us who learned from the stories of the midwives in the Exodus and so forth. I think about the mothers like Moses' mom, who have wrapped us in their ark of love and support and pitched our lives with godly principles and character that enabled us to navigate those stormy waters and to stay afloat during those times of those tumultuous tides of life. We celebrate those maternal sisters like Miriam when they could not hold us personally, but they guided us through their eyes, through their teachings, through their prayers and their principles. They guided us through the needs of life until we landed safely at the various places we were meant to plant our feet and begin our life's adventures. We celebrate those adopted mothers who, like Pharaoh's daughter, met us at the point where we needed them most. Whether as teenagers, college students, young adults, professionals, wives, husbands, fathers, or mothers in our own right, and pulled us out of the death-dealing waters of life and showed us that we had an internal compass that had gotten a little askew and then pointed us in the right direction. And we thank God that in these women was found the most sacred and special vessels, within whom and by whose hand God has entrusted the Savior of the world to be cradled, to be crafted, and to be formed. Now, this all sounded beautiful, but it's not that easy. Sometimes we know it is difficult to love our children. It is difficult to love other folks' children. From the time that they're small, some of our children are colicky, and then some of our other children are whiny. Some of our children are just demanding. And some of our children, through perhaps our own vices, are just spoiled rotten. And then they become annoying. But we are still called to love them through all of that. I think about, for those of us who are partnered and have spouses, that sometimes we think about that romantic love that I talked about in the beginning and how much, we love them so much. We were so in love with them. Something about them just, like maybe even just the sight of them just evoked something that you were just like, ooh, I go weak in the knees just when I look at him, like when I look at her, it's just, But then over the years, things start to happen. Arguments happen. Strong discussions happen. Different decisions are made. And sometimes that love that we initially had, the way we looked at them, gets lost along the way. And we have to rekindle that. Mr. Munger, I don't think by chance is sitting here today as the only person who's not a part of our worship team, who was married to his beloved Mrs. Bertha Munger, Bertha May. For how many years, Mr. Munger? I think it's 60 something, but I'm not sure. 68 years. Now I'm going to tell you, if they weren't God-fearing people, if they did not love each other unconditionally like Jesus loved us, they wouldn't have made it 68 years. Because that's a lot of life living. They have quite a few children that wreaked havoc on their relationships, because it takes a lot to raise all those folks. And they don't ever go away, right, Mr. Munger? Once you have them, they're here forever, even if they're adults. He's putting a hands up, y'all. So that lets you know, though, that when you love people like Jesus loves you, you can get through it all. And you find those moments. You may not look at them lovingly like you did when you first saw them every single moment of the day. But there are times when you catch each other's eyes, or you find yourself gazing at them, or in fact remembering them when you look at pictures or are reminded of particular events, that your heart just skips a beat. That you just sort of get that warm, fuzzy feeling again, because you remember that this is the thing that I've been given a gift, and because I was bold enough to open up and receive Jesus, then Jesus allowed me to be able to receive others. But it doesn't just go with those that are familiar to us. It also means that we need to be open to acquaintances, and we need to be open to strangers. And that can be difficult because we don't know everybody's background. People show up in very different ways. And sometimes it's hard for us to see God in them, especially when they're rude, when they don't think the way we do, when they may have biases and prejudices and things that make it hard for us to see the image of God in them. But they are still God's child. And as Christians, we have a special lens that we are to look through when we see other human beings and other creatures of the world. So when we come to today's gospel, Sunday's gospel, the second one that I read, not the first one, it is beautiful because it's all about love. And I love the part, especially when Jesus said, "It is not you who chose me, but I who chose you, and then appointed you to go and bear fruit that it would remain." How deep is that, y'all? It's so simple, but it is so deep. So if ever you felt like I had the most wretched growing up, like all this mothering stuff you're talking about, I didn't experience that. I'm not raising my hand as that I didn't. I did. But I'm just saying some folks would raise their hands and say, that wasn't my experience. You may not have noticed it, but if you're still here today and you're still in the game of life, it showed up somewhere. It was just that you were mired in so much you weren't able to see it. But guess what? You know why it was always there? Because God picked you. Through Jesus, he said, I pick you. I love you. Don't worry about all them other folks, because I love you. And if you are intentional with loving me, it will open up and you will find those folks that will pour into you like I have. And so then we have to ask ourselves, how do we bear fruit that will remain? Is it by preaching out on the street corner? Is it by going up to people and just wanting to shake them to death and say, wake up? Get out of the bed and realize that you need to be a part of life, and a part of life actively, but in a way that is loving towards your fellow human being. Or do we shout it from the mountaintops and then they think we're crazy? That's okay. There's lots of other things folks will call you crazy for. It might as well be for something good. But somehow, on the serious side here, the love that Jesus speaks about in Scripture is devoid. If you try and look it up in a dictionary, you're not going to find what Jesus meant. Because I think this love is a commitment to consistency, to put another person's well-being and happiness before your own. I don't mean lay down like a doormat, but I mean that if you're open like Jesus was, and you make the choice, you choose to love someone else, then automatically you care about their well-being, you care about their happiness, you care about them. It's like the love of a spouse for another one, when they put the other spouse's need or desires before their own because it's important to them. They can't be happy if their spouse is in distress. That's what we mean when we say that, like, it's reciprocal, like when you hurt, I hurt. When we are both doing good, then that's when the joy and the happiness is just abounding. Because if we're intrinsically tied to one another, I can't be over here having a party and getting it on and saying, yeah, I'm loving this, while someone who's intrinsically tied to me is suffering. That's impossible to do. And so this is the part that we have to get. Love overlooks another person's faults. Doesn't mean that we don't point it out, but you don't sit there and harbor on it every single day. You let it go and you try and figure out how to redirect and do better. Love focuses more than on what their good qualities are rather than constantly pointing out what the negatives are. Because if we keep pointing out what the negatives ones are, guess what happens? That's the ones that are going to come out the most because that's what you keep commenting on. So that's what reinforces that. We already know that. We all see children that if you reinforce negative behavior, what do we get? More negative behavior. But what about if we lift up the good things in a person, that then they start believing that there is something good about me, there is something that I can give to not just myself but to other people. Then we start seeing that. That is called love. That is called being invested in our neighbor and loving them. It's the love that parents have for their children when they play. Even when you're so tired that you don't have anything left and your child says, "Mommy, can we go for a bike ride? Mommy, can you play Barbies with me? Mommy, can we play trucks? Mommy, can we play dinosaurs and monsters and dragons? Mommy." And you're just like, if I hear mommy, mom, big mama, mother, my dear, one more time, you're gonna be like, ah! But you do it anyway. And you usually do it with a smile. They may not see that disgruntled smile, but they see mom is getting down on the floor, mom is in the mix, mom is there. Because that's what love does. Love moves when the body says, I can't do anymore, for the love of the other. It is also the willingness to lay down one's life for another to protect that person from pain. So you see, even when you openly choose love, which can be hard for some people and easier for others, it's no guarantee that it's still going to be smooth sailing. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be a bed of roses without the thorns. It's a both and. True love is hard. True love is demanding. It also requires that we have virtue and integrity. But if we have those things, then it brings out the best for both sides. Because then we're in a loving relationship in all that is true, all that is real. And everything that we know is real isn't always tied up in a nice, pretty bow. This is the love to which Jesus calls us all. It's a love that is abiding, it's a love that is deep, and it is a love that is ever expansive and abundant. It does not run out. It is a love that is inclusive rather than exclusive, so that others may live and live abundantly. Yet according to this passage, it may be precisely in that understanding what Jesus is trying to convey to us, in that if we're able to do that, then we finally really discover who we are as people, as Christians. And then we know what it really means to be loved. And so then we don't get caught up in that, I don't deserve to be loved. I'm not worthy to be loved. I just don't have the time to invest in love someone else. Or it hurts too much, so now I'm opting out. It negates all of that. But when we start thinking like that, there's something ugly in there that we don't often like to admit. And it's this thing called privilege. It's a privilege that thrives on the mentality of scarcity, meaning that there is not enough, so I don't have to invest, I don't have time, I'm not going to be bothered, I'm not going to be bound. It's I'm the nots. But that kind of thinking, that kind of feeling, that is not of God. That is of this world. That is something evil. That is something that is life-destroying rather than life-giving. And we know that as Jesus came and told us so. And for y'all who are old school, it's written in red in your Bible. He told you. And then he told the disciples what was going to happen. He told the disciples why he was going to allow it to happen, because they were like, if you're the king and you can heal all these other people, then why can't you get out of this? And Jesus said, that's not for me to do. My thing to do is to be sacrificial and selfless, to show you how much I love you. Because he already knew they were dense. He already knew that no matter what he said, just like our kids, no matter what we say, they're going to test us. And then they find out that what we said was true, that I love you no matter what, that I literally would give up my life for you. I sure hope I don't have to, because Jesus did it for all of us. But come push to shove, I know we would all do it for our children. So, Jesus did the most selfless thing ever. He died for our crusty, rusty, selfish, ungrateful, self-absorbed, mean, and at times hateful selves. He did it for all that and more. He did it because he chose to have infinite grace, infinite mercy, and infinite, as my kids say, and beyond love for us all. Because it flourishes even when we have the audacity to believe that there is not enough to go around. It makes us believe that someone else might be getting all the hugs and all the kisses and all the loving support, because somehow that other little thing that doesn't want us to live in abundance construes that to being, if someone else is lifting up, then somehow that's a deficit, and that then it needs to be taken down. And when we buy into that, we're buying into that privilege, we're buying into that scarcity, we're buying into that evilness. And we're not investing in love or Jesus. But our passage does not presume a world of scarcity. It presumes and makes clear that this is a world of abundant love emanating from God, who is love. Jesus makes it plain that even a kindergartner can get it. If you keep my commandments, which is to love one another, then you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. Because he did that sacrificial thing for all of us, all he asked for us is to love one another. The language of abide or dwell suggests that God's love is as abundant as the very air that we breathe. It is sufficient enough for all of us, not just a privileged few, but for all of us. Like a mother's unconditional love, we can dwell there and know that we are safe and know that it is enough. When we lay down our lives for another, we do not find ourselves deprived of life. Instead, we're drawn even further into what it means to be a part of God's love, which binds us together with those from whom we have now, or until now, maybe perhaps have been alienated. And oftentimes we find that the reasons we don't like certain people or don't want to do certain things is because we've made a choice not to be in relationship with people. And in the times that we find ourselves within our U.S. context, that means that some of us have decided we don't like BIPOC folks, for whatever the reasons are. Maybe it's history in your family, maybe it's where you live, maybe it's, all sorts of things, conspiracy theories, whatever it is, you have bought into that false narrative. Or we have decided that we don't like immigrants on a country outside of the Native American and First Nation tribes that were already here. Everybody else was an immigrant. So then how do you not like new immigrants unless you don't like yourself? And then what about LGBTQIAS plus folks? They have always been with us. And you don't even have to dig that deep. I'll just give you one. Think about Joseph and his coat of many colors. Just go to that text and think about who Joseph was. Think about the language that was used to describe Joseph. Think about the things that happened to Joseph. And then think about, even in spite of all of that, he was in deep relationship with God, which then allowed him to still have grace and mercy for those that did not show him love. But he was part of that community. and in our own Lutheran ELCA context, as we heard at the opening of our time this morning, that the Reverend Dr. Megan in the Sierra Pacific Synod was the first transgender person to be ordained in our denomination in 2006, and now is bishop-elect. Folks, in spite of the things of the gatekeeping, all of the ugliness that constantly comes up, Jesus finds a way, because we are not in charge. Jesus finds a way to let you know that all of God's people are part of God's good creation, and that we do not have the right to make doctrine that excludes certain people and then decides who is lifted up and who is put down and who we decide to put a foot in the neck and stop them from breathing. This is not part of God's divine plan of love one another. He didn't say love one another and ... He said period, love one another. So stop making commas, stop making semicolons, and adding things to that which he did not proclaim. Because then we're not being faithful. We are not being beloved community. Because you see, when we are as daring as Jesus, just a little bit, we don't even have just a little inkling, it cracks us open that then we have to drop our misguided privileges about who we think people are and who belongs and who doesn't. Because then it makes us understand that if I see you as my sister, if I see you as my brother, if I see you as my sibling in Christ, then I see myself. Then I see the image of God. This is how love connects us now and forevermore. I understand that today is a day for many of our families in this congregation and families that I don't even know are connected. We're overjoyed, we're loving, and yet at the same moment we might equally have heavy hearts for those of us whose mothers have been called home, for those of us who are mothers who have lost our children, either through natural causes or too early in life, that we just keep lamenting they still ought to be here, that I was ready to go. It never should have been my child. We also realize that Jesus, because that's maybe the only thing that gives us comfort, is that we know that Jesus tells us that he abides with our family ancestors, he abides with those we have recently lost, and that he also is abiding with us now. We remember that the gift of Jesus is that he chose to accept love for everyone, and that if we continue to choose love, then through him we are connected forever to those that we have lost and to those that we still have here. May that be a blessing to you. May that be some comfort to you, that the deep and abiding love, the sacrificial love that Jesus came here to bring to all of us forever connects us to him and to all of our loved ones. Amen.